Vin Diesel, an actor admired worldwide for his generosity, has invested in building a hospital to welcome everyone. But, disguised as an ordinary patient, he discovers something revolting. An arrogant doctor humiliates those who need it most. Will Vin remain silent? Follow along and find out. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and ring the bell to be notified whenever there are new stories on the channel. The orange evening sky hung over Lakeview, a medium-sized city in the United States. Between medium-sized buildings and busy streets, you could see the silhouette of a man leaning on the balcony of a simple hotel. It was Vin Diesel, recognized not only for his talent in action films, but also for his gestures of solidarity off-screen. Some days he felt restless. In the distance, cars passed without pause, but Vin kept his gaze fixed on the horizon. "I've got to check out what's really going on," he muttered, remembering the various reports that had reached him about Lakeview Hope Memorial, the hospital he had helped to found. He had always believed that any health institution should be based on compassion. That's why he had invested time, money, and hopes in building the place. But according to the reports he received, something was very wrong in the corridors and offices. The actor put on an ordinary jacket, worn jeans, and an old cap so as not to attract attention. He walked down to the street and got into his old but well-maintained black car. As he started the car, he felt a pang of anxiety. He needed to see for himself if there were any flaws in the way the hospital treated people who had no money or insurance cover. He set off, crossing traffic lights and avenues until he reached the building with its modern facade and illuminated sign. The lobby of Lakeview Hope Memorial was full. The air was cold from the air conditioning, and the smell of antiseptics mixed with muffled voices. Bright lights illuminated every corner. People of different ages waited patiently on metal or hard, plastic chairs. Some coughed, others pressed an ice pack against a sore spot. Vin Diesel observed everything carefully. He approached the reception desk, where a tired-looking woman called Bethany Pierce was typing something into her computer without raising her eyes. When he leaned against the counter, she asked, "Name," not wanting to reveal who he was. He answered on the spot, "Vincent Adams." She just shook her head and asked him how he intended to pay. Vin said he would cover the cost in cash. Bethany rolled her eyes, as if this was a tremendous waste of time, and handed him a basic form to fill in, indicating the waiting area. With the paper in hand, he headed towards the benches and sat down. Next to him was a white-haired man, Carl Thompson, who was breathing heavily, holding one of his hands against his chest. He looked uncomfortable and frightened. On the other side, a young mother, Donna Wilson, was holding a baby who was crying softly, her forehead on fire, indicating a high fever. Vin looked away from Donna, who, in a trembling voice, explained that she was worried about her son, but she didn't have health insurance and had heard terrible stories about how the hospital acted towards those who didn't have insurance or resources. He just listened, feeling more and more indignant inside. Meanwhile, he saw nurses passing in the corridor. They seemed overworked, as if they were trying to make up for the lack of staff. In the midst of this chaos, a doctor in an impeccably white lab coat, walking with an air of superiority, caught his eye. It was Dr. Logan Mitchell, in charge of the emergency department. Suddenly, a man in a well-cut suit, Brad Freeman, arrived at the hospital and was immediately ushered into Dr. Mitchell's office, without taking a ticket or queuing. He seemed to have absolute priority. That made Vin Diesel even more attentive. Nearby, Carl Thompson was still moaning low in pain, and Donna was trying to calm her son, who kept crying. In an impulse of desperation, Donna got up and went to reception. "For God's sake, my baby has had a fever for days. Couldn't he be seen first? He's getting worse." Bethany didn't even lift her eyes from the monitor. "I told you, everyone waits their turn. If you can't afford insurance to cover emergencies, I can't change the rules." Donna walked shakily back to her chair, holding her crying baby tightly. The sound of the baby stirred Vin Diesel. He took a deep breath, trying hard to stay calm. Then, he looked up and saw Dr. Mitchell leaving the office next to Brad Freeman, who was laughing at something the doctor had said. The patient in the suit left, satisfied with the quick service, while an elderly man and a distressed mother remained, unattended. Donna, desperate, decided to approach Dr. Mitchell before he locked himself back in his office. She ran towards him and begged, "Doctor, please, my son has a very high fever. I need help." He looked her up and down, rolling his eyes. "And you expect me to stop everything for every child with a fever? If you're worried, go to a public hospital. Here, we have rules and protocols." Donna had no reaction. The doctor turned and walked away, without any remorse. Vin Diesel felt his blood boil, but held back. He needed to observe more before revealing himself. Carl Thompson gave Vin a pained look and tried to pull in air with difficulty. Vin decided to go to Bethany to complain about the situation, but the receptionist repeated the same line. "If you want priority care, you'll have to pay extra or have a special health plan." The doctor's arrogance wasn't enough. There was collusion from the administrative department. Vin Diesel returned to his seat, determined to find out what else was going on. After a while, he got up and discreetly went down a side corridor. He found a restroom where two nurses and a technician were talking in whispers. He approached, trying not to be noticed, but ended up hearing bits and pieces of the conversation. Nurse Lisa Carter was telling another colleague that Dr. Mitchell had mistreated another patient that morning. The technician, Mike Davis, questioned why they didn't report it, but Lisa blurted out that the administration covered for the doctor, claiming that he brought in good statistics and reduced costs. Anyone who opposed him risked being fired or retaliated against. Vin Diesel decided to reveal himself. He strode into the room, facing the employees who looked at him in awe. "Excuse me, I didn't mean to scare you, but I've noticed some strange things around here too. Is it always like this?" Lisa Carter bit her lips before answering yes. That Dr. Mitchell received support from his bosses because he saw wealthy patients quickly and spent less time on those who couldn't afford elaborate tests. Mike Davis added that if anyone complained, they would end up working bad hours or losing their job. Vin felt his anger rise. He realized that it wasn't just one arrogant doctor, but a whole corrupt system that valued money over lives. He thanked the staff for their sincerity and promised that things would change soon. He left there ready to act. But first, he wanted to make sure he wasn't being too hasty. Time passed, and finally they called the name Vin had invented, Vincent Adams. He made his way to the office of Dr. Logan Mitchell, who looked at him with visible contempt. "So, what brings you here?" asked the doctor, while typing absent-mindedly on his computer. Vin mentioned feeling constant fatigue and muscle pain, but before he could explain, Dr. Mitchell rolled his eyes and said that it sounded like a trivial problem. "It's just stress. You need a muscle relaxant and that's it," the doctor decreed, quickly signing a piece of paper. Vin tried to argue that it wouldn't be wise to diagnose someone in less than 2 minutes without checking their history or exams. Dr. Mitchell, impatient, retorted, "Look, I know very well when something is serious. And you're not paying for a VIP consultation. If you want special attention, get it some other way." That was enough to confirm everything. Vin Diesel stood up, facing the doctor. "I hope you treat your next patients with more respect than you've shown so far." Dr. Mitchell laughed sarcastically. "And who are you to tell me what to do?" Vin didn't answer. He opened the door and left, his heart pounding with indignation. He realized that there was no reason to prolong his disguise. He had to confront the hospital administration immediately. Vin Diesel went up to the 5th floor, where the administrative rooms were located. A tall, strong security guard approached him, telling him that only authorized personnel could be there. He then bluntly announced in a firm voice that his name was Vin Diesel and that the hospital administrator would probably want to talk to him. The security guard, confused, called the reception desk on the floor. Within a few minutes, the administrator himself, Alan Sullivan, appeared with an air of surprise. "If I'd known you were coming, we would have organized something," said Sullivan, trying to sound courteous. Vin Diesel raised his hand, asking him to get to the point. They entered a meeting room. The administrator closed the door and gave a forced smile, trying to calm the investor down. "So, what can I do for you, Mr. Diesel?" Vin sat down and got down to business. "I've received complaints about poor service, negligence, and even humiliation. I decided to come without warning, and what I saw here disgusted me. This hospital wasn't built to distinguish between rich and poor patients." Sullivan sniffled, visibly uncomfortable. He replied that they maintained protocols to sustain the place financially, that they couldn't serve everyone without prioritizing those who paid. "Dr. Logan Mitchell has excellent results, Mr. Diesel. He reduces costs, speeds up procedures, and..." The administrator tried to argue. Vin interrupted him immediately. "Does that explain why people with no money are suffering in the corridors, while patients in suits leave here smiling?" Sullivan was at a loss for words. Vin then demanded that Dr. Mitchell be called in. He needed to look him in the face one more time, this time as the owner of the hospital. After a few minutes, the door opened and the doctor appeared in his impeccable lab coat with the same expression of superiority as always. When Sullivan pointed to Vin Diesel and explained that he was the main investor and owner of Lakeview Hope Memorial, Dr. Mitchell's eyes widened. His arrogance faltered for a moment. "So you're Vin Diesel?" he said, nervously. "If you'd warned me before, I'd..." The actor uncrossed his arms and took a step forward, without hiding his indignation. "If I'd told you, you'd have found a staging here. I wouldn't see what I saw today. A mother begging for help for her son. With a fever, a man moaning with chest pains, people being humiliated for not having insurance." The doctor tried to mumble some excuse, claiming he was following protocols, but Vin interrupted him. "You don't know what compassion is. You're fired, doctor. And if I find out you're doing something similar elsewhere, I'll go to the medical council and report you." Dr. Mitchell reddened with anger, retorting that Vin was making a serious mistake, as he would lose out on numbers and donations. The answer came immediately. "I'd rather lose money than humanity. Get out of my sight." Sullivan didn't even try to defend the doctor, who left escorted by security guards, his face contorted with frustration. As soon as he was gone, Vin turned to face the administrator. "It's not enough to remove Dr. Mitchell. This culture of neglect has to end. I demand changes in the hospital immediately." The administrator agreed, resigned. Vin demanded empathy training, the implementation of anonymous reporting channels, a restructuring of triage protocols, and real care for people. In the days that followed, Vin Diesel immersed himself in the hospital's routine. He instructed nurses to report any abuse they saw. Supervisors were replaced by professionals who were more open to dialogue. Receptionist Bethany Pierce underwent intensive training to learn how to treat each patient humanely. The same happened with other employees who previously only thought about reports and finances. Some sectors were given more money to hire staff, and the entire staff was instructed to see patients not as figures, but as human beings. Vin Diesel's constant presence in the corridors of the institution motivated many there. He made a point of personally listening to the stories and complaints, recording everything. About a month later, Vin returned to Lakeview Hope Memorial to assess whether the changes were really working. As he entered the lobby, he noticed that there was better organization. The triage team was quickly attending to more serious cases, while patients with milder conditions were waiting without being ignored. Bethany, the same receptionist, now spoke with a restrained but noticeably kinder smile. Nurses like Lisa Carter walked around the wards offering water and guidance. The atmosphere was less chaotic and more welcoming. Passing near a corridor, Vin spotted young mother Donna Wilson. Her baby, fully recovered, was crawling on the floor without any sign of fever. The child recognized Vin and, still not saying much, moved towards him, rehearsing faltering steps. Donna smiled and thanked him with emotion, saying that the changes had helped him a lot and that everyone now received the care they deserved. A little further on, Carl Thompson, The gentleman, from before, seemed in a better mood. He saw him and nodded positively, indicating that he had finally had treatment for what ailed him. As he walked out of the glass door, Vin Diesel took a deep breath, feeling the fresh air outside. That moment meant the realization of a dream that had almost been destroyed by greed and arrogance. He thought about how often in life, simple people are ignored, and how it only takes a few courageous actions to bring hope back. With his gaze lost on the horizon, Vin Diesel reflected that true strength lies not only in muscles or fame, but in the way each person treats others. The hospital could now serve as an example for the whole region,